Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Zoe Hawkins, and my friend and co-host Jo Wheatley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. The topic for discussion today is strengths-based coaching. And we thought that this could be a useful topic because, people often come to coaching focused on their gaps and the deficits. And, we can all find ourselves focused on that and talking about that. And as coaches, we can also find ourselves, supporting our clients with what the clients say that they want support with. Some of the drawbacks of that are that when the coach comes kind of fixated on their deficits and their gaps, and then we start working on that it's almost like helping them to dig a hole further for them. And it can also impact the dynamic between the coach and the coachee. So if they're coming and they're talking about all of their deficits and they're experiencing you as being calm and knowledgeable and et cetera, that it can create this dynamic where they put you on a pedestal. And that obviously isn't, as coaches or when we're having coaching conversations, that isn't the dynamic that we're looking to foster. That's not a healthy dynamic. So we wanted to talk about strengths-based coaching today so that we could talk more about how can we help our clients to leverage their strengths more, and what do we mean by strengths-based coaching, and then also thinking about the strengths of coaches and how that influences the way we show up.
I think one of the places to start when it comes to strengths, I remember, first being introduced to strengths through like Strengths Finder work back in the corporate days. And I remember doing the strengths assessment and it gave me like a top 10 strengths. And I remember looking at them, it's almost like shrugging them off as not being particularly valuable. And that reason why, after I read around strengths, is often the things that you are the strongest at, the most good at, the most talented in, feel easy, like breathing. And so you disregard them as being assets to yourself because I don't know, maybe within me somewhere there's like this belief that in order to be good at something, I've got to work at it. It's got to be a grind when strengths are effortless, and I think so many people, and I see this in clients, they don't know what their strengths are. And often in our pre-coaching questionnaire, we ask people to list their top 3 strengths or a question similar to that. And that is often the most unanswered question of all the things in the pre-coaching questionnaire. And so often if people can't identify the things that are easy, that are effortless, that are of high value to organizations or to others, they then only go to like, oh, well, I struggle with so much, so I can't identify my strengths. And so in coaching, there is this piece here around helping the clients to unveil the things that help them to get into flow. And when they're in that flow state, to be identified. So what can you use there to support you in what you're trying to achieve? So it's really valuable work.
Yeah, so clients often can't see their own strengths, and so that's where the contract that you have with your client is important. Do you have a contract to be able to, and by contract I mean agreement, like ways of being together, where they welcome observations from you? So even with that, you might still ask for permission, and you might choose to offer an observation of a strength that you see or something you see as a strength in the other person. It doesn't mean it's a fact. You're offering it in a non-attached way and noticing how the client responds. So some clients will light up, their shoulders will drop. They'll just feel a lovely warm feeling inside when it's a compliment to them, and they will receive it. And then they'll explore it, and you can ask questions around, and how could you, and they're like, I always wondered if that was a strength, but it's just something I do so easily. And so then you might hear the discounting, and it may be you identify that discounting is something that would be useful to work on. Or they'll want to understand more about how come you see that in them, and so they start to then develop an understanding that that can in fact be a strength, and you can talk about how they may be able to leverage that strength in order to achieve their goals. Some people, when you offer an observation which is sharing a strength, their whole body will almost vibrate, and they'll want to kind of bounce it straight back. They don't want anything to do with it, and that is information for them and for you as the coach. And how does that reaction and that experience of it what does that tell them about their belief system? What is the relevance of that in terms of them achieving their goal? So even just opening up or offering what we call those presuppositions, like questions like, what strengths do you have that can help you with this? It's helping them to focus their attention on their strengths. Whereas if you ask a question that says, what will you need in order to achieve this? It's that almost suggests that you don't have it and you're going to have to go and get it, which sounds like hard work. Whereas if you ask what strengths have you got, it's like you already have it, it's already within you. And that can be a little bit more resourcing, for example, than the other question. Obviously, it depends on the client, it depends on the goal, it depends on the relationship. But hopefully that gives an example of some of the subtle differences in the questions that we ask and the impact that they can have.
Mm. I've done a lot of work with clients around forgotten strengths. So a client may be bringing their current role, perhaps, and the different struggles that they're having in their role. And where we sort of get to is that they've moved away from their strengths, partly because of there's this ease thing, so the things that they find easy, they then go seek more challenge. But the challenge they're seeking isn't in line with how they can use their strengths. So they end up in these roles where they aren't able to use and connect with their strengths enough to provide them with the resource and the motivation. So you can work on those deficits and those problems and those challenges with a strengths lens. So talking about, when was the last time you were in flow and what was happening and what were you connected with? How often do you access that state now? How might you reconnect to those strengths in this role? So it's enabling people, not necessarily, sometimes they will come with a view of getting out of that place that they've got themselves to. And that's very much a narrow vision. So what we do in coaching is we help to expand the vision before necessarily making the decision to check on, well, is that aligned? Is that wholly what you want? Because most people say, like, no, actually, I don't want to leave the organization or leave this role. I really like my manager, or I really like my team. It's just this, that, and the other. Well, what are all the other ways then? And strengths can be a lens and a view to be able to reconnect with some of that.
And we use it with our team, don't we? How can you, what opportunities are there for you to use your strengths in your role? How might you be able to use your strengths even more in your role so that it's a way to explore, like bring joy? Because often joy is associated with working in a way that's aligned to your strengths. And in fact, I was saying to you as we were talking about expanding our team, and I'm like, the excitement for me is part of the rationale behind that is I want to do more of what I feel that I'm particularly good at, or the value that I can bring in the business. And I recognize there are other things that either I'm not so good at or I can do, but it doesn't bring me joy. And so sustainability for me is really important. But I think strengths are also closely related to values. So I'm thinking about like recent conversations with coaching clients about their values, and then how often I hear in the values the things that I know are just an innate part of who they are and the strengths that they have. So for example, if somebody has a value around connection, that they often have very good interpersonal skills. And so, helping clients to understand the connection between, their strengths and their values, or their strengths and their beliefs, or their strengths and their emotions, can help them to start to make sense of the importance of this, and how, what is different for them if they focus more on their strengths than on their gaps. Do they need to be brilliant at everything, or is that a route to burnout?
Mm. I think it's a lens at which to make some peace or get some acceptance around the things that you aren't necessarily naturally gifted in. So, I think there's times where clients will come with a particular challenge, and maybe it's been feedback that they've received in their career, like time and time again, around, oh, you need to do more of this, or you need to get better at that. And the focus can very much become locked in on this, I want to use coaching, therefore, to do this thing. And sometimes it's about letting that go and, accepting that perhaps that just isn't the destination. So what could the destination look like? Maybe it's a way to reframe what needs to be achieved, and doing it in a more creative and different way. I can remember things like that from my career. I think it was around networking. And I was told my early careers, like I needed to build my visibility, ironically, now that I'm podcasting, but internal to the organization, connect with more people. And I was looking to these other leaders who were extroverted and they were doing it in a very easy way. And I thought that that was what I needed to do. And so I would be trying to meet somebody else's model of what I was being told I needed to have. And it wasn't until I realized around, well, actually, how do I build relationships? What is my way of building visibility? And it wasn't to be singing and dancing and showy. It was about deep, intimate connections. And so as soon as I realized that, I was able to let go of what I was told I needed to do and find my own way to do that. And I think that's what we do in coaching is we help people to re-examine what is needed, what do I need to be resourced, and what do I have in my tank already that is going to help me to achieve that.
Yeah. And, I think when people train in coaching, it's because they're following their strengths. That's what I see in the people that come and join our programs anyway, is they have this sense, they've received feedback from people, consistently, that they're really good at, some core aspect of coaching. And often other people have suggested to them, oh, you'd make a great coach, for example. Or they just know that they are naturally drawn to working with people and supporting people and helping people to grow, and they want to do even more of it. And so strengths are often that avenue into doing the training. So when you're working as a coach, how do you describe in your chemistry conversations your style and your approach, and where you're going to start and what you're going to focus on? So this understanding of your style, you might be reflecting, thinking, oh yeah, that's totally the way I coach, or no, that isn't the whole way I coach, but yes, I definitely do that, or I'd like to do a bit more of that in my questions. So I might start to change some of the questions that I ask.
And you've trained in it as a strengths
Mm,
assessor, haven't
mm.
you? I haven't, but I still draw on strengths in my coaching. But how would you say that training and going deeper into strengths has influenced your coaching?
Well, it was the profiling tool that I felt most drawn to, out of out of all of the different kind of profile tools that you can do. I think what I really it actually helped me more as an individual, I think. So probably unconsciously I do have more of this approach in my coaching, but it's not something I need to do consciously. And maybe that is because it's a natural strength of mine to see strengths in other people. But I remember, you get your top five, because obviously you do your own profile, and I had it on my desk for years. And I found even that really resourcing to look at that. And I felt like it was telling me I'm good at these things. And so it's almost like, oh yeah, I like that is it. Or when I'm making decisions, how do my strengths relate to those things? But we may have talked about this on a podcast before. Focus was one of the ones that's in my top 10. And I was like, oh God, feel like that's a weakness because I have so many different ideas, but actually then it reframed it for me to realize actually not everybody can do that.
Mm.
Not everybody can hold all of these different things. And how does that help me as a coach? Well, often clients come and they are offloading, or they're trying to work out for themselves what their goal is, and they're sharing all of these things. And I am able to hold that information, and I am able to bring it back into the bits of it back into the conversation. It's almost like I do a weaving through the conversation. And so many clients say to me, how do you do that? How do you remember that? And it's kind of like I do and don't know how I do
Mm.
it, because it is a strength. So it does give me that I know that I know that I'm in the right profession, and I do see the strengths in people. And part of it is sometimes is we talk about using the words that clients use, and that is really important, clean language. And there is a space, I think, for being able to genuinely almost surprise and delight clients. If I feel a really strong thing, I can see something in them they can't see in themselves that may resource them, then I would genuinely offer that. And sometimes they don't, that clients, just they need to take time to be able to work out, does that resonate with them in any way or not? So I'm not the type of coach that's like, oh, you must do a strengths profile and work off the back of that. That isn't my style of coaching. But even, and I would recommend anybody, look at those, because if you don't even know where to start with strengths, and we often talk here, don't we, about like supporting our clients to find a language for things. Well, like the emotions wheel, people love that because it's like a dictionary of emotions. Looking at strengths profile will give you an idea of the language that clients might use. So if you've got a client that's struggling to identify their strengths, you could bring that up as a resource, and they could look through and almost do that themselves in, ranking it, rather than searching around and thinking, oh, I don't even know how to answer that question. But if
Mm.
they can start to identify it, then they might come back to the next session and say, it's really interesting. It seems like such a simple question, but I just couldn't answer it. And then when I looked at that thing that you talked about, or now I realize actually I have got these strengths, and when I think about my goal, I can see how that would can support me to achieve it.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember you doing your strengths, and weirdly, how we had so many of the same strengths. And we also, strengths gave us a language to be able to talk about the overplayed strengths. And I think that's something that we can
Mm.
support clients with as well, is recognizing when is something that you're really good at actually becoming an obstacle for you or for others, perhaps that you're with as well. So it's having a lens on self-awareness, isn't it, really? I mean, that is at the core of what we do as coaches. We help clients to build their self-awareness. So um, it's an important language to learn, because it can, as we said at the beginning, you can go down this path of being very deficit orientated. And we see that in coaches with their marketing, don't we? When they're talking about the services that they offer, they will talk about the problems, the challenges. And if you take confidence coaching as an example, um, you might talk about, lacking confidence, imposter syndrome, feeling self-doubt. The energy, as you start to talk about those things, I can hear it in myself as I just list them off. Like, it's a very sinking energy. Whereas if I start to talk about impact, influence, legacy, leading, inspiring others, they're all related to confidence. That is the opposite side of confidence, but it's an energy that is more lifting and more light. And whilst, yes, people do need to identify, where they are experiencing the challenge to connect with perhaps a need to join coaching, I do think people are more motivated by what is possible for them than necessarily their pain points. You need to bring both. And I know that's not about coaching per se, but you need to bring both in your coaching sessions. You need to bring both in your marketing. And, that is important to make sure that your mindset isn't slipping into a deficit mindset if you're spending time working with clients on gaps, because it's an easy thing to do.
And I think strengths-based coaching is not one-dimensional. So it's not just about helping a client to identify their strengths. If take, for example, like learner is my identified, I think, with Strengths Finder as my top strength. But a revelation for me in their description of that was that it may be that I enjoy the process of learning. Rather than the learning, it's what I'm learning. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the feeling of expansion, of being challenged, of my whole worldview changing, and what may become possible for me. The actual kind of like ingestion of the topics itself is not so much my where I find love, or maybe where my strength is. Now I can and do integrate my learning, but I'm more interested in being creative and like creating my own stuff or my own version of that, rather than necessarily adopting somebody else's. So I think when you're supporting clients to identify and leverage their strengths, having the courage and taking the time to sort of go underneath that strength. So if your client says, "Oh, I've got a strength around um, connecting others," for example, okay, tell me more about that. Really get underneath it. What is it about connecting others that you're particularly strong with? what do you see as the core elements of being good at connecting other people? Like, start to get into the nuances of it, because that often is where the magic or the key is for them, in terms of, it's in the detail, because those are the conversations they're probably not having with themselves. And clients come to coaching to have new conversations with themselves. As much as they're having a conversation with you, in many ways, their experience is of having an inner dialogue around it.
Mm. And I mean, whereas we talk about strengths, there are strengths that you will have that you bring to coaching. And we want to share with you our business lounge offer that we have available till the end of the month, which is £99. What we know from coaches that the skills you need to coach and the strengths that you bring to coaching aren't necessarily the strengths and skills that are required to build a business. And we have a wonderful business lounge community of coaches who are all coming together to grow and develop their business, supported in the business lounge by over 40 coaching trainings and community there. And you can get that offer for just £99 for lifetime access to all of those trainings to help you build the skills and the strengths to be able to have a greater impact with your clients, because the only way that you're going to make an impact in the world is when you get your business out there to your clients. And we want you to use your strengths every day in coaching through creating the business that you want to create. So head over to igcompany.co.uk/lounge before the end of the month to snap up that offer and join this special community.